Hi guys, I want to talk about a custom GRE study plan for somebody who wrote to me, and they basically said that they're trying to get into a program. They took the power prep with basically no prep, and they got a 156 verbal, a 147 quant. Their goal scores are more like a 160 verbal and a 150 quant. I'll comment on that goal in a second. The test date is February 3rd. February 3rd. So I want to make a video instead of just writing back to this person so maybe some other people can benefit. So if this was you, what would you want to do you think? Well, you've only got a few points to go, but on the GRE, it's a deceptive. A few points is actually kind of a lot of work, and it represents a pretty big jump in percentile. So we don't want to go too lightly here. We've got about a month. So let's talk about this goal. Is it realistic? I would say yes. And the reason why I say that is because I know this person has a good verbal background. If they were able to get a 156 with no prep at all and basically no familiarity with the test, and the goal for quant, it's going to be maybe a little bit more work, but that's definitely doable. A few points in a month. I hope that anybody can make that kind of increase. So let's think about what we can do for this person here. So let's talk about verbal first. So the thing with verbal, the thing to keep in mind is that ETS material is the only thing that we should use. So ETS is the company that writes the GRE. They publish a couple of books, the official guide, and they also publish a verbal practice book. And both of those are worth getting. That's about all you need to get for verbal in terms of books. And it's really about quality, not quantity. And I say that because the metric for verbal is how well you understand questions in terms of telling me or being able to tell somebody where the right answer is coming from exactly, and then why any given answer choice is wrong. And the good news is ETS is very deliberate and very careful and very methodical about justifying things in a certain way. And we want to get used to the way they justify things. So that's why we only want to use ETS material. So the only thing that this person will probably need in addition to these books is pretty much some verbal technique. So I have some free technique on my, let's say, Vince's YouTube playlists. In terms of one of my playlists on my YouTube channel is called Verbal and Math Techniques. So you can kind of explore that and get the basics of certain verbal questions on there. I also have a full verbal course if you want to get something a little bit more complete. That does cost money, and you can find that on vincecoachin.com. So that'll walk you through a lot of verbal questions, basically explain them from top to bottom. So my YouTube channel, if you're into free stuff, has plenty of stuff too. I also want to throw out another name, Greg Matt, gregmatt.com. Another free resource, really good stuff. He's made a ton of YouTube videos, many of which are for verbal. So I think you're going to like his stuff too. So once you've gotten technique, you don't want to really do a lot of ETS work until you have learned some technique, because you want to know what you're doing. You don't want to waste these questions and just kind of be guessing on them. We want to get them right the first time, and kind of goes back to the quality, not quantity. You don't want to burn through 50 verbal questions and get half of them wrong just because we're rushing them or we're just taking guesses. That's not going to do you as much good. So in a month, you also probably want to do a little bit of vocab studying. So let's also throw in vocab. So basically looking up words you don't know. I have some flashcards on Quizlet that you will probably like, and there's a blog on my website as well, all about how to study vocab. So my flashcards are on Quizlet, and they're basically vocab cartoons. Just makes it a little easier to study. So that in a nutshell is verbal. So let's talk about quant. So quant is going to be a little bit more work, and for quant, let's work backwards and say, the metric that matters for me is the number of ETS questions, the number of ETS questions you've done by yourself. In other words, with no hint, with no solution. You just looked at the question and you finished it and you got it right. The bigger that number gets of ETS questions that you've done, the better you get at quant. And I don't care what those ETS questions are. Kind of the caveat to that is if you can't do an ETS question that you try to do, who cares? Doesn't matter. We just want to increase this number as much as we can and not worry about the questions that you can't do. Okay, so how do we develop the ability to do ETS questions? I'll throw out a few ideas. One is use the ETS Math Review, and that's a free PDF. It's literally called the ETS Math Review. And go through that, make sure you know all the concepts within. If you don't know any, you can use Khan Academy to brush up and do some practice. I've got a blog about this process too on my website. It's called Every Single GRE Math Concept. So let's say you've gone through the math review. Hopefully you get that done within a few days or maybe as long as a week, hopefully shorter than that, because now you want to get some repetition. And if you're willing, I know it's only a month, but if you're willing to get another book, the Manhattan 5-pound book is great because you can do a bunch of questions in a row. Let's say you're weak with probability, you can do 20 probability questions. So for this book, just great because it allows you to get a lot of experience with a certain kind of question in a row. But the most important thing, remember, we eventually want to graduate to ETS material. So for ETS, we've got the ETS Big Book. That's a great place to start because the questions are easier than the GRE of today. The ETS Big Book is a PDF. If you Google it, it's online for free because it's out of print. So maybe starting there, but then eventually aiming to finish the ETS official guide, quant stuff, and then the ETS quant practice book. So those are important because those are the most recent books and they're going to give you more experience. So the bottom line, the reason why I talk about the number of ETS questions as the metric for success is that when a random question pops up on the screen on the real GRE, hopefully it reminds you of something you've seen before. It's going to trigger a memory. It's going to remind you of a concept, and then you're going to be able to make that connection to begin the problem. And that's kind of the key. It's like, how do we begin a problem? How do we get it going? And if you have a lot of experience doing ETS questions, that's kind of what you need to be able to get a question going that's a random question on the real test. The only thing I didn't mention, and I'll just mention it up here, are the power prep tests. So the person who wrote to me has already taken one of them, but there are 4 more. And the way that we would probably want to do those is to, for the remaining weekends left before the real test, take the PP power prep on a Saturday and analyze on a Sunday. And when I say analyze, on my study plans on my blog, I have a series of questions that you need to ask yourself when you're going through a question you got wrong or that you guessed on or that took you a long time. Those questions will really help you get the value from the question in terms of recognizing what it's testing more easily, writing down a lesson that you learned from that question. So you're going to go through, and every week is going to be spent more or less doing the following. You're going to be doing verbal questions after learning technique, like I said. You're going to be focused on full understanding of them, not really how many you're doing. And then for quant, it's going to be getting up to speed with the concepts. You got to get that out of the way. If you want to get the 5-pound book, that lets you get repetition. But at the end of the day, you got to be able to do a lot of ETS questions. The big book, the quant practice book, the official guide. And then you've got to make time for the timed tests, the power prep tests, and get used to the time pressure. The good news is, for our friend here shooting for a 150 quant, she doesn't really have to be too aggressive about how many questions she gets done on a quant section. she probably is going to go into that quant section with the attitude that she gets to skip a few questions at least, maybe a handful. And the way to figure out which ones to skip are the ones that you're stuck on. So if you do get stuck on a question, just let it go. Take a guess. Make sure you fill in something, because you could get lucky and get it right. But just take a guess. And just expect that to happen. There's going to be some questions that you get stuck on. That's okay. You only need a 150. Maybe you're shooting a little higher. Even if you're shooting for like a 155, you could, skip some questions. And that's just smart test taking. Now you have more time to make sure that you get the questions right that you do actually know how to do. So there you have it, just a basic study plan for somebody trying to improve this much in a month. Probably a couple of hours to 3 hours of work per day. Optimally, if you can do more than that, fantastic. But if you're working full time, you probably can't, and that's okay. Do what you can. It's all going to help. And if you have any more questions, let me know.